Revenge with Karen. I knew something was off when the intern called me ma'am like I was an exhibit in a damn finance museum. I wasn't even 50. My desk had 3 monitors, 4 post-its, and a half-dead succulent I named after the last CEO who thought EBITDA was a breakfast dish. And yet, there I was, still invisible. Still the woman who quietly filed the 10K tickets, triple-checked revenue recognition entries, knew how to slice deferred tax assets like a holiday ham. No one remembered my birthday, but if I missed a comma in a Schedule 13D note, it'd make headlines. Welcome to compliance, the work no one sees until you screw it up. And I didn't screw up. Ever. For 11 years, I was the spine of a publicly traded logistics firm, not the face, not the mouth, but the goddamn vertebrae that kept it upright. Other departments showed off charts and buzzwords in meetings. I buried myself in internal controls and audit trails. I had a laminated flowchart for revenue deferrals, a spreadsheet that tracked cross-subsidiary reconciliations, and a memory like a steel trap dipped in decaf. People like me don't wear statement jewelry or demand attention. We whisper to legal before quarterly reports. We remind accounting to reclassify revenue before earnings calls. Don't climb ladders, we anchor them. And for over a decade, it worked. I wasn't promoted fast, but I was never questioned. My desk was where execs stopped by after everyone left to ask, hey, can you just double-check this thing before morning? And I did, every time, quietly, perfectly. Then came Dean. Dean arrived like a shirtless calendar model, wandered into a tax seminar. 37, grinning like he'd just shorted Bitcoin, fresh off a VP title from a startup that had never once passed a real audit. He had that overconfident charisma that made people forget to ask if he actually knew what he was doing. Finance liked him. Ops adored him. Legal tolerated him. And the board, they loved him. Because Dean was modern, which in our world meant loud, casual, and allergic to documentation. He brought in cold brew kegs, placed our expense platform with something called Expensely that kept crashing, and started calling monthly close meetings Finance Fridays, where you had to wear a themed hat. The man once said in a company-wide Slack, "Why do we still have all these old processes? Feels like legacy bloat, you know?" The room laughed. I didn't, because I was that bloat. And I knew what happened when you cut muscle thinking it's fat. The shift was subtle at first, restructured the financial reporting teams into pods, pushed accounting to speed up reconciliations, told legal to stop overlawyering internal memos. During one town hall, he smiled right at me and said, "We've got to move fast and not get bogged down in compliance tape." The room clapped. I gripped my coffee mug like it was the last stable thing in the building. By Q2, my team had been shuffled. Not fired, just scattered. Integrated, he called it, like tossing flour in the wind and pretending it's baking. I kept my title, but half my access vanished. Systems I used daily suddenly didn't require my credentials. I was looped out of contract approvals. My red flags were now just suggestions. Still, I did my job, quietly, obsessively. I flagged 3 oddities in deferred revenue, nothing dramatic, just discrepancies that didn't reconcile between our CRM exports and the general ledger. I logged the anomalies, timestamped them, and sent gentle nudges to the appropriate stakeholders. No one replied. Dean had decided we didn't need so many approvals. "Trust your gut," he said once, holding a la croix and smiling like he'd invented cash flow. And that's when it hit me, Dean didn't know what he didn't know. Worse, he didn't care. To him, compliance wasn't safety. It was friction. And friction slowed down his vision of a fast, flashy, modern finance org. But I knew something else too. The thing about friction, it keeps wheels from flying off the damn car. So I waited, quietly, watched the chaos churn behind his Instagram-ready grin. My job was no longer about catching errors. It was about recording them. Because I'd been in this game long enough to know, when things fall apart, the person with the receipts becomes the person with the power. And I had plenty of receipts, because while Dean was busy streamlining away the backbone of internal controls, I was building something else entirely, an invisible paper trail, with every misstep traced back to the moment he chose optics over operations. He thought I was legacy noise, but I was the system warning light. And soon, the whole dashboard would light up red. It started with a ring light and a shriek. We were at the annual company offsite in Scottsdale, hosted at some overpriced resort where the Wi-Fi cost extra and the coffee tasted like divorce. Most folks were lounging by the pool in branded polos. pretending they weren't working while pretending even harder that they were important. I stayed in the back corner of the patio with my laptop, triple-checking deferred revenue figures for a client contract that legal kept forgetting to notarize. Glamorous, I know. Then she appeared, Dean's daughter, 21, going on insufferable. Bright blonde with lashes that could swat flies off a windshield and a voice like helium suffering a panic attack. She'd shown up to the finance retreat dressed like a fashion intern on probation, tube top, furry pink slides, and a phone tripod slung over one shoulder like a weapon. "Hey ye guys," she sing-songed, sweeping into the brunch buffet like she owned the cap table. Time for content. Dean didn't blink. "This is Ashlyn," beamed to the room, my daughter and a rising content strategist. I blinked. So did the controller. Legal visibly braced herself like someone was about to throw an HR grenade. Ashlyn set up her ring light next to the mimosa bar, turned to the camera, and chirped, "Today I'm bringing you into the world of boomer finance, where women still think spreadsheets are sexy and no one knows what crypto means." She scanned the crowd and locked eyes with me. "Yow," she pointed, waving me over. "You've got the whole vibe. Come say something like, confused but cute. Like, what's a TikTok? That would be hilarious." I closed my laptop. "No thank you," I said evenly. "I don't perform for free." She laughed like I was joking. I wasn't. "Oh my God," she giggled to her camera. "She's in character already." Dean sauntered over, smirking like this was all harmless fun. "Come on," he nudged. "Can't you just play along a little? It's good exposure for the company." I looked him dead in the eye. "If the SEC ever audits us through TikTok, I'll consider it." That didn't land the way I'd hoped. Ashlyn made a face like I'd farted in a yoga class. Dean's smile twitched. People around us suddenly found their bagels very interesting. The moment passed, or so I thought. I left the event early, went back to my hotel room, logged into the company VPN, finished my notes on the revenue inconsistency I'd been tracking for 2 weeks. Entries from 2 subsidiaries didn't match the master ledger. I queued the flagged entries into a draft email. I didn't send it yet. I wanted to be thorough. Turns out I wouldn't get the chance. The next morning, 8:02 a.m., I opened my laptop and found a new calendar invite. Subject: Role Realignment Discussion Attendees. Dean, HRBP Emily. Location: Sunset Conference Room. Realignment is corporate for you're about to get dry cleaned out of your job and repackaged like off-brand Cheerios. I arrived to find HR smiling like someone practicing empathy they bought on Etsy. Dean didn't even look up from his phone. "We're thrilled to discuss how your talents could be better leveraged across strategic work streams," Emily said. I blinked once. "Am I being demoted?" Dean finally made eye contact. No, not demoted. Laterally expanded. You'll be more cross-functional, less siloed. You'll help enable synergy in process optimization. I'd heard better lies from my niece when she swore the dog ate her homework. My title changed to Process Liaison, Strategic Work Streams. My team was sunsetted. My system's access was being evaluated, and my inbox, it was now a digital graveyard. No reports, no threads, no P&L updates, just calendar fluff and company newsletters about mental health awareness. And Ashlyn's video? It hit 500,000 views by lunch. Caption: Boomers in finance be like, "What's a TikTok?" The comments roasted me, called me a Karen with a calculator, said I looked like I hoarded HR violations in a spreadsheet. Dean liked the video, literally. His name was there under the heart icon. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I walked back to my room, opened my draft email titled Pending Tasks, and sent it directly to Dean. Every flagged inconsistency, every incomplete audit note, every financial breadcrumb that I'd been too cautious to escalate. Subject line: Deferred revenue, outstanding items for review attachments. 6 message: Per your transition plan, please advise. I knew he wouldn't, but that wasn't the point. The point was the time stamp. Because someday, when someone asked who had warned him, I wanted the email to answer for me. The new desk they gave me didn't even have a filing cabinet. Just a potted plant that smelled like mildew and a dry erase board with the words Process Flow TBD written in red bubble letters. I stared at it for a solid 5 minutes, wondering if the exclamation point was meant to be encouraging or just insulting. Probably both. Process Liaison, Strategic Work Streams. That was the official title, which sounded like something cooked up in a focus group full of MBA interns and edibles. I asked twice what the role entailed. Once to Dean, once to HR. Dean's answer was, "Think of it as liberation from the weeds. You're high altitude now." HR's was somehow worse. "You're a connector, a bridge, like a neuron for organizational clarity. I was a glorified paperweight, with a LinkedIn title no recruiter would ever take seriously. Stripped me of financial systems access. No more GL entries. No CRM, no reporting dashboards. The software I'd trained 5 departments on now rejected my login. The weekly compliance call I used to lead, canceled. My calendar, empty except for Dean's new efficiency syncs and a standing Friday vibe check where we were supposed to bring insights from cross-functional peers. The vibe, for the record, was rot. My old team was scattered, some absorbed into ops, a few reassigned to analytics, the rest reconsidering options. I didn't blame them. You can't rebuild trust in a system that just threw your captain off the boat mid-storm. But I didn't scream. I didn't escalate. I didn't ask to speak to anyone's manager. Instead, I sat down at my ghost desk, opened my sent folder, reread the email I'd forwarded to Dean the morning after the TikTok circus. Subject: pending tasks urgent review suggested. It was still marked unread. It listed 6 flagged anomalies, 3 in deferred revenue across Q1 and Q2, 2 involving contract obligations that weren't recognized properly, and 1 entry that appeared duplicated across subsidiaries. Nothing explosive on its own, but together, it painted a pattern. Not of fraud, exactly, but sloppiness, pressure to hit quarterly targets. The kind of shortcuts that look harmless until you're in front of external auditors explaining why your revenue schedule resembles a Jackson Pollock painting. That email wasn't just a paper trail. It was a fuse, and Dean, he was smoking beside it with a blindfold on. I made 2 copies of the original spreadsheet. One went to my personal cloud drive, encrypted. The other went on a thumb drive I kept in my purse, hidden behind my old security badge. Then I waited. Days passed. Dean held town halls in the cafeteria about agility and desiloing. He replaced our compliance dashboard with something called RevBot, which looked sleek, but had the audit trail integrity of a napkin. He started a Slack channel called #Finance Vibes, where someone posted memes of Elon Musk and GameStop stock jokes. He didn't mention me. Not once. I became a ghost in open air. Colleagues passed me in the hallway with that careful half-nod reserved for people who might be radioactive. A few brave souls messaged me privately. "Are you okay? WTF was that reorg? Did you really get moved because of a TikTok?" I never answered directly. Just said I was focusing on alignment tasks and happy to support from wherever made sense. Because here's the thing, Dean thought he'd neutered me by isolating me, thought he'd erased my influence by deleting my access. But influence doesn't live in dashboards. It lives in memory. It lives in the quiet trust of the legal analyst who used to send me contracts for pre-review, in the audit manager who always CC'd me when she flagged strange numbers, in the controller who once whispered, "I only sleep because you double-check everything." So I kept showing up. I attended every meeting I wasn't uninvited from, asked clarifying questions, took notes no one asked me to take. Every time Dean said we've reduced approval cycles by 80%, I jotted down what used to be there and who was now signing off. Every time he said no blockers on revenue recognition, I wrote down which client names weren't mentioned. And I always smiled, not wide, not fake, just enough. Because humiliation doesn't kill you. It hones you. Dean thought he'd given me a muzzle, given me a notebook. And in that notebook, the story was already writing itself. All I had to do was let it grow. The beauty of a sinking ship is that the leaks start quiet. At first, it's just a drip here, a creak there, nothing anyone wants to deal with, especially not a guy like Dean, who believed reputation management was the same as actual management. He kept smiling through quarterly preps like we weren't one Excel formula away from financial sepsis. Man walked around like Sarbanes-Oxley was a lifestyle choice and not a federal law. But I wasn't watching the headlines. I was watching the source files. I noticed the first ripple 2 weeks after my reassignment, when a former coworker from audit pinged me on Slack late at night. She was one of the few left from the old compliance regime, someone who still said material impact like it meant something. "Hey, quick question," she wrote. "Didn't happen to flag anything weird in Q2 deferred rev for Client M, did you?" I stared at the message. Client M. The exact contract I'd included in my pending tasks email to Dean, the one with a start date discrepancy, and a clause that triggered double recognition under certain delivery milestones. A subtle landmine if left alone. I could still see the timestamped copy in my cloud folder, sitting there like a loaded pistol in a locked drawer. I flagged it before my role changed. I typed back. Entry dates didn't align across systems. Check the contract terms under Section 4B. Should have been prorated, not front-loaded. Typing indicator blinked. Then, holy SHT. That's what I thought. But RevBot says it's clean. Of course it did. RevBot was Dean's flashy, API-heavy replacement for our legacy compliance portal. It prioritized speed over cross-validation, was allergic to nuance. And nuance is where compliance lives. It didn't catch the contract clause. It didn't even look at the contract clause. Dean had instructed the tech team to build in streamlined logic for RevRec. Translation: skip anything that might delay quarterlies. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I went back into my archive drive and started assembling folders. Q2 flags pre-reorg, Dean pending email thread, audit alerts unresolved. I renamed everything using the same structure our legal team preferred for discovery logs, just in case. Then I exported my entire mailbox. Just a quiet, invisible little insurance policy. Within a week, 3 more messages trickled in. From legal: do you remember if we got a secondary sign-off on the subsidiary contract roll-ups last quarter? From ops: hey, weird Q. Do you ever notice inconsistencies in platform usage reports for our vendor reconciliation? From a second friend in audit bluntly: okay. I'm just gonna ask. Did you flag anything that got buried? I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I said, what specifically are you seeing? They described things I already knew but hadn't voiced. Journal entries that looked clean but lacked internal memos. Approval chains missing signatures. String of revenue bookings that looked suspiciously accelerated for the holidays. In other words, Dean was doing what too many golden boys do when handed the keys, polishing the chrome while the engine burns oil. And the company? Still clapping, still sipping La Croix in Friday sinks, still liking his daughter's TikToks where she danced in front of the building like it was an urban backdrop. But the cracks were there. I watched as quarterly close emails started shifting in tone. Slight delay on validation. RevBot experiencing temporary sync issue. Legal reviewing contract language, minor hold. No one panicked, yet. But panic is always preceded by the illusion of control. Meanwhile, Dean strutted into meetings like a man who'd invented margin. He bragged about cutting compliance clutter and automating controls. He made a joke at all hands about how the spreadsheet police got promoted to crossing guards. People laughed. I wrote it down, because this wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about the humiliation or the TikTok or the title they surgically replaced with a word salad. It was about the system. The rot blooming under every cheerful PowerPoint. The board might not see it. The exec team might not want to. But audit, legal, they were starting to smell smoke. And I was the one holding the matchbook. Strategic calm is a funny thing. People mistake it for detachment, passivity, but strategic calm is just controlled combustion. You don't stomp out the fire. You stack the kindling. You make sure everyone knows who had the lighter when the alarm goes off, so I kept stacking. Silently, carefully, because the leaks had started, and all I had to do was wait for the water to rise. They served champagne at the Q3 town hall. Real champagne. Not sparkling cider, not some startup brand kombucha, but the good stuff, poured into fluted glasses like we'd just been acquired by Warren Buffett himself. Everyone clapped. Finance, HR, even the one guy from IT who usually smelled like burnt popcorn and existential dread. The CFO had exceeded expectations. We had optimized workflows. We were future-facing. And at the center of it all stood Dean, mic in one hand, ego in the other, smiling like a man who believed his own PowerPoint animations, called it the new Financial Velocity Initiative. He clicked to a slide titled Legacy Controls vs. Agile Compliance, the transformation journey. On the left, a bloated flowchart with red X's through words like internal review, secondary validation, compliance hold. On the right, a clean, colorful pipeline with arrows labeled autosync, quick approve, and my personal favorite, trust-based recognition. Looked like the schematic for a toy train set designed by people who'd never seen a derailment. Let me break this down, Dean said, walking across the stage like he was hosting a TED talk he'd dreamed about since puberty. We cut review loops by 80%, realigned team functions, streamlined entries. Our close cycle is down by 3 days. That's not just compliance, that's courage. The crowd clapped again. Someone even whistled. I sat 2 rows from the back, not clapping, not blinking, just scribbling in a legal pad I'd brought from home because the company now discouraged paper waste. Slide after slide detailed how we'd shed friction from our internal financial processes, how old systems of trust were reimagined for scale. And every single one of those so-called improvements, every slash of red ink over a control mechanism, was something I had personally built, tested, documented, implemented over a decade of quiet labor. Controls to catch timing discrepancies on subscription revenue, gone. Peer review flags for cross-subsidiary transfers, optional. The quarterly sign-off checklist we designed after the 2016 close call, replaced by an emoji-filled Slack thread. Dean even used my old compliance flowchart in his presentation, labeled it Old World Bloat, and animated it crumbling like dust. I nearly laughed. I might have, if the bile in my throat hadn't tasted like resignation. After the applause died down, Dean stepped off the stage and fist-bumped the VP of Ops. I heard him say it, just barely above a whisper, but loud enough for the people behind him to catch. She just didn't get the vibe. I didn't flinch. I wrote it down. It was always vibe with Dean, that amorphous smokescreen of charm and slogans. He was allergic to specifics. Vibe was how he got away with saying nothing while looking like he'd said everything. Vibe was how he fired 2 people and called it culture curation. Vibe was why he demoted me without ever mentioning performance. The board loved it. 2 weeks later, his face appeared in the internal newsletter, holding a bottle of champagne and a printed dashboard. Caption, Dean streamlined success. They gave him a performance bonus. Stock options. A LinkedIn shout-out from the CEO. I got invited to a brainstorming session about cross-functional trust rituals. I showed up, took notes, and watched as someone suggested weekly gratitude gifts. Meanwhile, I quietly updated my private log of removed controls. 32 and counting. The simplified revenue process now bypassed 4 levels of review. Journals were auto-approved within 48 hours. Client contracts were being processed with only cursory legal input, unless someone specifically flagged a risk, which no one did anymore, because Dean said the new philosophy was assume good intent. And yet, RevBot glitches were increasing. Forecasts weren't reconciling with CRM exports. Ops kept sending oops emails about delivery mismatches. The audit team was still split over that Q2 client M entry. Behind every one of those red flags was a mechanism I had quietly removed from Dean's narrative, but preserved in my offline files. See, Dean didn't know that I'd re-architected our entire compliance schema 4 years earlier after a near miss with the SEC. He didn't know that the legacy controls he mocked were designed in response to material risk, not to slow him down. He sure as hell didn't know that the one person who could trace every missing control to a very real financial exposure was still showing up every day, smiling politely, documenting his every shortcut. He thought he was playing chess, but he never realized I'd already mapped the board, so I watched, I waited, and I kept my notes neat, time-stamped, and backed up in 3 locations, because one day the vibe would crack. And when it did, no one would remember the champagne, remember who built the safety net, and who decided they didn't need it. It started with a 2-sentence memo buried in the audit Slack channel at 7:13 p.m. on a Thursday, because nothing good ever starts during business hours. Subject, Q2/Q3 deferred revenue variance, client G, subsidiary 4 and 7 note, preliminary discrepancy identified. Further review recommended. No drama. No accusations, just a breadcrumb. I knew exactly which loaf it came from. Client G was one of the contracts I'd flagged months earlier in the pending tasks email to Dean, the one with that delivery clause so slippery it could ice skate. The contract had overlapping milestone dates for services rendered across 2 of our subsidiaries. That alone wasn't the issue. It was how those dates were recorded. Subsidiary 4 listed a revenue recognition date a full month earlier than Subsidiary 7, created an illusion of earnings in Q2 that actually belonged to Q3. And in our world, that's not a rounding error. That's fraud if you're unlucky, sloppy if you're not. I stared at the memo, heart steady, fingers still. I didn't react, just added it to my private log. Memo audit deferred Rev Client G7 to 13 p.m. Slack PDF by Friday morning. The whispering had begun. My old peer in audit, Melissa, stopped me in the stairwell. It looked like she hadn't slept. You didn't hear this from me, she muttered, but legal's asking for your old compliance checklists and externals requesting access logs. Someone opened a can. I nodded once. Didn't ask, didn't gloat. That afternoon, my inbox lit up. Subject, quick sync, rev schedules from audit external at company name to, hey, we're reviewing some legacy contract data and believe you might have context. You join a call Monday to help clarify historical recognition assumptions. I took a sip of my coffee, still warm, typed back, happy to assist. Please send the reference docs beforehand. I wasn't surprised. I was prepared. See, when Dean gutted the compliance flow, he didn't just toss out procedure. He tossed out documentation. My documentation. The ones with footnotes, timestamps. Historical assumptions built from real decisions, not vibes. RevBot couldn't answer. And when the new fast lane processes failed to trace journal entries back to origin, someone had to pick up the breadcrumbs. That someone, as it turned out, was me. On Monday's call, I wore my nicest blouse, the one I saved for funerals and resurrection stories. Melissa, the external audit lead, legal's junior counsel, and the partner from our accounting firm were all on. Thanks for joining, Melissa began. We're trying to validate the Q2 revenue alignment between subsidiary 4 and 7 for client G. The entries were booked under Dean's simplified model, and well, let's just say the trail's a little thin. I nodded, understood. Do you have the original contract pulled up? They didn't. Of course not. I do, I said. I flagged this last spring under what was then the multi-subsidiary deferred review matrix. There was a clause in section 4A.1. Delivery milestones had to be satisfied by both service branches before revenue could be recognized. I highlighted that in my original audit note. Silence. Then the sound of keyboard clattering on the other end. You flagged that internally? The external auditor asked. Yes. Email sent to Dean April 17th. Subject line was pending tasks. I included 6 items, client G among them. Can forward that note again if needed. No need, legal said slowly. We'll locate it. You go ahead and try. That email sat in Dean's inbox like a landmine with a ticking calendar, unread, time-stamped, irrefutable. Within 48 hours, more meetings were scheduled. More requests came in. My access privileges were quietly restored to the legacy contract archive just for the investigation. The external auditors pulled 2 more client schedules for review. By Wednesday, legal had initiated a full retroactive reconciliation across all simplified RevBot entries. Not just client G, all of them. Because when you find one loose thread in a rug, you don't just snip it. You flip the whole damn carpet. Dean didn't say a word, not to me, not publicly. But I saw it in his face in the hall, that weak, colorless, fake smiling, teeth grinding behind the gums. Passed me once near the elevator and nodded like we were strangers. That suited me just fine. Because here's the truth about revenge. It doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be petty. It just has to arrive. And mine was right on schedule. The invite came without fanfare. Subject, pre-read meeting revenue recognition / audit memo from GC office time. 11:00 a.m., conference room B2. It didn't even say my name. Just dropped in like a pebble in a still pond. But I knew what it meant. The walk to conference room B2 felt longer than usual. Not dramatic, just weighted like the air knew. I passed Dean's assistant in the hallway. She avoided eye contact. Her usual happy Friday was replaced with a silence thick enough to stir with a spoon. When I stepped into the room, it was just 2 people, General Counsel Janet Marks and Melissa from Internal Audit. No small talk, no coffee, just a laptop, a legal pad, and a copy of our internal compliance charter folded in half on the table like a forgotten Bible. Janet gestured to a seat. Thanks for coming on short notice. I sat, calm still. I already knew what was coming. Melissa gave a half nod. Her voice was clipped, efficient. We're finalizing the board pre-read for Q3. Need clarity on historical rev recognition controls, specifically pre-simplification era. We're involved in all of it. I opened my folder. Inside, printouts of the pending tasks emailed to Dean, highlighted, annotated, accompanied by the exact contract language from client G that outlined dual subsidiary delivery requirements. I slid them forward. These were sent April 17. I included 6 issues in total. 3 were linked to revenue alignment. 2 have since shown discrepancies in Q2 and Q3 reporting. Janet picked up the page, scanned it with her lawyer squint. Melissa leaned in, reading the notes with the intensity of someone confirming a nightmare they already suspected was real. Janet looked up. You kept all of this? I didn't blink, of course. Melissa flipped the page. This was never forwarded to audit. I know, I said. Janet folded her hands. We thought you were gone. I wasn't gone, I replied. I was just watching. They didn't respond right away. Lissa reached into her bag, pulled out her laptop, and opened a file named Board Memo Draft 3. Inside was the letter, a summary of the deferred revenue misalignment, the exposure estimate, and the recommended remediation steps. It was careful, precise, not accusatory, not yet, but it had teeth. Janet scrolled to the bottom. We're sending this to the audit committee by COB today. There will be a closed-door review ahead of earnings. She paused. Not listed as author, she added. But you'll be CC'd, I nodded once. Understood, that was the moment. Not some explosive courtroom scene, not a standing ovation or a public shaming. Just that, a quiet return, no announcement, no headline, no badge of honor. Just my name on the CC line. But in our world, that meant something. It meant credibility. It meant record. It meant when the music stopped and chairs were missing, I wouldn't be the one standing. Janet closed the folder and slid it back toward me. One more thing. If the board asks for context, verbal, off the record, are you willing? I stared at her. Yes, but I won't speculate. She smiled tightly. Of course not, you never did. I stood up to leave. Paused at the door. There's more coming, I said. What we've seen, that's not the extent of it. If RevBot bypassed these controls for one contract, it bypassed them for others. You'll find more. Melissa nodded. Ready typing. And with that, I walked out. Not triumphant, not smug, just ready, because it wasn't about vindication anymore. It was about repair. And this time, I wasn't watching from the sidelines. I was back at the table, and my receipts were louder than applause. The boardroom was ice cold, the kind of cold they dial up for intimidation or lawsuits. Same HVAC setting, different flavor of dread. 12 leather chairs around a walnut table, polished to a mirror. The platter of untouched muffins in the center. No one eats muffins during bloodlettings. Dean sat at the head of the table, grinning like he was about to pitch a sitcom. New haircut, new tie, same laminated confidence. He opened with a joke, some quip about navigating turbulence with tailwinds of innovation, which made exactly 0 sense unless you're the kind of person who thinks metaphors are management. The CEO chuckled. The head of ops offered a tired nod. General counsel didn't look up. I wasn't in the room, but I didn't need to be. Because this moment had been set in motion the day Dean ignored that email titled Pending Tasks. I was CC'd on the packet. I saw the final draft before they printed it. I knew the page number and the phrasing, and I knew Dean had no idea what was coming. Let's kick things off, he said, flipping open his laptop. Our Q3 numbers are strong, close cycles are down. RevBot continues to deliver frictionless execution. That's when the audit chair, Marjorie Webb, 26 years in corporate governance and 0 patience for salesmen, cleared her throat and placed a sealed envelope on the table. Quiet, no theatrics. Just a subtle slide across the polished wood, stopping perfectly in front of Dean. Dean blinked. What's this? An addendum, Marjorie said, prepared jointly by internal audit, external, and legal. I'd like it reviewed prior to today's final earnings approval. He opened the envelope with the same smirk people use when they're sure the punchline is in their favor. It vanished by line 3. He reread it, then again. His mouth opened slightly, lips curling inward like they were trying to disappear. Someone, no one remembers who, asked, "Is there an issue?" Dean cleared his throat. Then, in a voice suddenly short on oxygen, read aloud. A material weakness in financial reporting has been identified stemming from unremediate deferred revenue anomalies linked to client G. Estimated impact, $14.1 million in misallocated recognition across Q2 and Q3. Source, removal of compliance validation protocol post-process simplification. Silence. The kind of silence that bends the air. No one breathes because they don't know if the room still allows it. Dean looked up, blinking like a man trying to remember the last safe place he stood. Where is this coming from?" he asked. Marjorie didn't flinch. The original anomaly was flagged in April. Your team failed to escalate. Dean's gaze darted toward the general counsel. Janet spoke calmly. The task was assigned. It was not addressed. Dean fumbled. But who assigned it? Janet tapped a page in the memo. Referenced in documentation from our process liaison, strategic workstreams. Email, April 17. Confirmed receipt on your server. You never responded. Ops looked at legal. Legal looked at audit. No one looked at Dean. He slumped slightly. Not a collapse, but a deflation. Like a balloon trying to bluff its way through a needle. Why wasn't I told earlier? He asked. You were, Marjorie said, closing her folder. Just didn't read it. And then the room fell quiet again, not out of fear, out of certainty. The kind that comes when everyone realizes the show's over and the cast list is being reviewed for terminations. Dean's fingers hovered over his laptop, but he didn't type. No one moved. 4 chairs down, someone finally asked, "What's the exposure risk?" Janet answered without looking up. "Depends. If it stops at client G, we restate guidance. If it extends across other contracts, we report to the SEC." Dean opened his mouth. Nothing came out. And somewhere, not in that room, I opened the board packet again. CC, my name subject. Q3 Financial Compliance Addendum for review. The only note I added: let me know where to forward my old keycard, because this wasn't just a reckoning. It was the receipt. And Dean, he was already choking on the fine print, was responsible for reconciling this. The question cut through the tension like a wire through wet paper. No inflection, no accusation, just a quiet landmine dropped by a board member with silver hair and the kind of calm that only comes from watching other men implode under fluorescent lights. Dean blinked, once, twice, a little too fast. His knuckles whitened around the edge of the board packet like he was trying to keep reality from slipping out of his grasp. Janet, our general counsel, didn't flinch. "The issue was flagged," she said, flipping calmly to the relevant page. The assigned party failed to act. Another board member, voice drier than the Arizona air outside, asked the follow-up, and who assigned it. Janet didn't even look at Dean. Her eyes moved to the printout, then to the room. "She did," she said, tapping the sender field on the April 17th email. Subject line, "Pending tasks urgent review suggested." He didn't say my name. She didn't have to. It was printed right there above the timestamp, above the list of 6 unresolved compliance concerns, number 3 being the now infamous $14 million deferred revenue anomaly. Dean's face collapsed inward, not like a crash, like slow, rolling erosion. His mouth opened to respond, but closed again, halfway through a breath that never reached his lungs. I didn't," he began, voice cracking. Didn't realize it was material. It looked like a placeholder, not an official alert." Janet didn't blink. "It was formatted according to internal escalation protocol, with supporting documents." "I never got a follow-up," Dean said, more to himself than anyone else now. She never looped back." Janet's tone didn't shift. "She wasn't required to. You were the acting CFO, that was it. The final pin." The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was surgical, clean, cold. The kind of silence that follows a decision already made in 3 minds before the 4th finished blinking. Dean didn't argue, not really. He just sat there, lips parted, eyes darting to corners of the room that offered no exits. He looked at the letter again, still trembling. And the rest of the board, they'd already moved on. Down the hall, in a smaller conference room, I sat across from Marjorie and Janet as they laid out the transition. "Like you back," Marjorie said. "Not in the old role, something more embedded. You'd report directly to audit. No detours." Janet slid the offer across the table. "Salary bump, reinstated title, updated, of course. Authority outlined in black and white, unambiguous. My signature wasn't even required that day. They already knew my answer." I took a breath, steady, even, then I smiled. "Please forward my previous desk's location," I said, standing. I left a few receipts there. Neither of them laughed. They didn't need to. Because the beauty of surviving with your integrity intact is that you don't need applause. You don't need revenge with a capital R. You just need clarity and a desk with your name back on it. Let Dean keep his influencer daughter and his dead dashboards. Let him explain away timelines to committees who now know better. As for me, I'd done my part. Silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. And in the end, it spoke louder than any microphone Dean ever touched. Appreciate you sticking around, you wise old rebels. Smash that subscribe button, or this fossil might just cause another epic fiasco.